Well, as you expect, I could go on forever about this subject. And in a classroom we'll have a debate about all sorts of things where people will bring, issues that have happened to them, and we can debate them on the grounds that there's often no right or wrong, there's just a different way of looking at things. But in this sort of one-to-one discussion, I'd like to just summarise a couple of things, if I may. We said good leaders followed. Good leaders followed, bad leaders are obeyed, mostly. And what you do and how you go about your task really matters. It may be that you do not find it easy to face a sea of faces in economy, to talk as I would. And it's easy for me. I've had to make presentations to an auditorium of 1,000 people in it. And I've had to overcome my natural reluctance to talk to large groups of people along the way. It is important to recognise that in any area of leadership where you're going to choose a different behaviour, you've got to do your best to stay within or very close to your comfort level. So if you don't find it easy to talk to large groups of people when you walk around the passenger cabin, as I hope you do, well, try talking to the children or to the elderly, because those sorts of people will give you the confidence over time to talk to the general public, if I can put it in those terms. Try things that are just beyond your level of comfort, and in time it will be included and you'll be able to stretch yourself further. Not everybody is an extrovert. In fact, there are more introverts in British Airways than there are extroverts, and therefore there are more people around, more commanders, potential commanders like you, who are going to find it difficult interacting with groups of people in an effective way. So if you're one of those people, then just try, just go a little bit further. Get feedback, get honest feedback, and be honest with yourself. How did that come out? Can I do better? And if you take that approach, in time, you will become a better leader. And do you know what? The spin-off is, the more you put into this job in terms of leadership, the more you get out of it. Because one of the probably best kept secrets of our role as commanders is that if you make time and space, if you're a good leader, this is the easiest job in the world. It is money for all rope, and there is instant gratification throughout. And yet, we all know, there are so many of our colleagues that make it so bloody difficult for themselves and for everybody else. You wonder why they do it. But it's not something for most people that comes naturally. It's something that has to be worked at. There aren't many Wellingtons in this world, Napoleons in this world, Caesars in this world. But the qualities of those sorts of leaders can be modelled, can be observed, modelled, and enacted in your behaviours that will make a difference. That will make a difference. If you're honest with yourself, then you will know the sorts of things that should alert you to the fact that you're losing your rag, or you're going to step into an area of dialogue that you don't want to be in. You're going to cease to be empathetic. You're going to cease to be concerned for your crew members. And that should ring an alarm bell. Because you know as well as I do that when you're having an argument with someone, the end result at best is that you'll agree to differ. Whereas if you're having a discussion, persuasive discussion, where you take account of other people's views and yet you hold your own, funnily enough, you're more likely to get a satisfactory conclusion. In exactly the same way, we said that crew resource management wasn't about being nice to people, it was about being effective. It's about being effective. You need to know at what point your stress level is going up. You need to know the indicators. For me, as soon as I start missing articles, I know I'm on my first level. If I snap at anyone, ATC, crew member, cabin crew, whatever, then I'm at my second level. And in both of those areas, as soon as I recognise it, I make time and space. You need to know yourself. You need to know yourself well if you're going to be an effective leader. An effective leader delegates. An effective leader will take responsibility when things go wrong. In other words, you shield your subordinates. Okay, it might not have been your decision, but that's what happened, and that person is responsible to you, and therefore you take the responsibility. If you do that, they'll respect you. They'll respect you. You want to be the sort of person that in a wartime scenario, the guys will follow you even if they're going to die. I wonder if you can do that. It's worth a try. It's worth a try. Well, by this time of the day, if the group isn't flagging, I'm beginning to. You know, even if we had an effective group and I've just been a set of traffic lights, I'm probably getting a bit hoarse. So I try and tie a couple of things up under the subject of our agenda about route flying. And the discussion really is all about making time and space, being selfish with time and space because I'm the commander. So thinking about our arrival, for the moment I'd like to just rest with long haul, our arrival in Compass Centre to go flying out of Heathrow. Where are the pinch points? Well, the pinch points really are the fact that the agreement provides for a 15-minute briefing, that if we are going to visit the cabin crew, then their briefing starts 5 minutes before that. And actually our whole departure process is controlled by the bloody transport. Now, can you brief effectively in 15 minutes? Answer, absolutely not. If you're doing your command course alongside me, at some point or other I'll ask you what was in the briefing. And if you aren't able to answer, it will give me a hook to hang on the fact that you haven't briefed yourself properly. Now, 15 minutes historically came from the fact that in long haul, when you pitched up to the desk, you were briefed formally and properly. The dispatcher, that is the briefing officer I should say, had spent the last hour going through every bit of minutiae of the flight, summarised it and gave the captain a one-to-one of the pertinent points relevant to the flight so the captain could make his fuel decision and any other decisions that was necessary. In our current high technology environment, where everything is in capitals on our new brief, not in colour, and so on and so forth, it is incumbent on you, the commander, to brief yourself. So, what does Colin do? Well, one, I am not going to have my time stolen by visiting the cabin crew in their briefing room. I will always make a presentation to them on the bus. Something I'm going to come back to a little bit later. But that's my way. You do whatever you like. But I will always pull off the new brief. As I swipe in, I'm there early. I only go to work 4 or 5 times a month. Coming in a few minutes early on a long haul operation is neither here nor there. Absolutely different to coming in 5 days a week on short haul, where I'm going to try and time thing to the last possible minute. But in any case, I don't have to brief myself in the same way because I read it yesterday and the day before and the day before that. But in long haul, I'm going to have to brief myself from scratch, almost certainly. So I get there early, swipe in, run off a new brief, and I go and have a cup of coffee, or sit quietly in a corner if the coffee bar's full of people. And what I do is I read very carefully the new brief, and I check off the things that are of importance, so that by the time I meet the rest of my crew at -15, I am already briefed. The next thing I do is troll along to the aerodrome briefing unit, because I don't keep up here necessarily what the alternates for the particular destination I'm going to can offer me. Therefore, if I don't know whether it can offer me Cat 2 or Cat 3, I don't know whether the alternate's got to be better than Cat 1, or if it can only offer me Cat 1, that it's got to be non-precision, and so on and so forth. Because part of the process of briefing is that bit of the air navigation order that I cannot set off for somewhere that is below my weather minima for the hour plus or minus that I need it. The time that I need it minus an hour. So the briefing part of the operation is the first part of the process that is a legal process, and it needs to be right. So I've got to check off, can I get out of London? Yes. Can I get into my destination at the estimated time of arrival, minus an hour? Yeah. Can I get into my alternate? Yeah. Does the alternate offer the appropriate weather for that time? Yeah. And then I can think about the fuel and so on and so forth, things that we normally do. So there's a little subroutine or subdiscipline, if you like, that enables me to, because I'm a slow reader and because I'm old, that I need to take time for, and time in the quiet, not when my colleagues behind me are discussing which bar they're going to go to in Singapore. Whilst I'm in the aerodrome briefing unit, if I need to update my knowledge, then I'll update it at that point. Because I have actually, in swiping in, said that I am up to date, and I will ensure that I am up to date for the area that I'm going to visit on this trip. So what I have done, in effect, is I have made time for myself. If on the new brief there was a snag, then I've still, at this point, still got ample time to wander around, get the minimum equipment list and look at the ramifications of that snag. With a bit of luck, it will be cleared by the time we've got to the airplane. But if it isn't, then I know about it. And I've had a chance to read it myself. Now we're going to read it again together with my crew at -15. But nevertheless, I've given myself a start of a 10. Now equally, you can do that at home. You can run it off on from the BA net. But whatever you need to make the briefing effective so that you genuinely are briefed. Genuinely are briefed. You do. What works for you, works for you. I'll just describe what works for me. There are 101 other things that a training captain has to do in Compass Centre, and equally I will get those out of the way, such that it's a single-minded process, if you like, when we start our briefing. And if I can, I'll start it not at -15, but at -20 or even -25. Because what I like to do is to be on the coach before the cabin crew. More about that in a moment, and the reason why, but that is my target. I don't make a song and dance about it. You're the only person that knows that, but that's what I do. Well, now comes the time in the day when you're going to meet the crew. In the first instance, meeting your co-pilot. So a word about co-pilots. A little bit later I'm going to talk about the fact that your co-pilot is, if you like, somebody that you're going to lean on, but he or she may not be able to give you the support that you routinely gave your captain. And during your command training, you've got a training captain in the other seat. But when you go on your own, you are open to, other than the protection of brown lining, the community at large. And what I will be saying to you on the laying on of hands is that a prudent captain will expect the worst, will expect the least experienced. And even if he's very experienced, will perhaps by virtue of the fact either they can't or they're unwilling to provide you with the support that you gave your captains, then the position of expecting the worst will stand you in good stead. And what I like to do is to expect the worst and then be able to relax as it becomes evident that they are really switched on and they're going to be a real support in the operation. So meeting the crew is an extraordinarily important part of our job as a captain, because if you haven't flown with this individual or these individuals before, then they will certainly know you by reputation as a commander. They will have made up their minds or not, but in any event, the first impressions count aspect of the meeting is something that you need to take account of. So, you know, the guy who arrives at -15 minutes and 30 seconds doesn't actually give you a great deal of time in terms of niceties or small talk to try to break the ice. So if you like, you're handed a problem not of your making, and one that's already encroaching your time and space. But that relationship that you create early on is one that is a very important one. And you will learn the fact that the shape of the next part of the departure process will reflect on how you have gone about this first part of your duty day. So, in any event, whilst he's making some sort of assessment of what sort of guy you are, you're doing the same thing about him or her, or them, there's more than one of them. And there are things that you might want to know, like, you know, how long they've been on the aircraft, if you're a training captain, if you become a training captain, you know, what they expect from you today. It's training admin when I told you. And so on and so forth. When did the last fly? Who's short sectors? Any other things like that. I should have said that by now, whilst I was milling around, I will have had at least a superficial look for the CSD. If I found him or her, I will have said, you know, pleasantries of course, but I will be saying something to the crew on the bus. More about that later. If I haven't found the CSD, then I've just put it into abeyance until I get on the bus. Anyway, the process of that 15 minutes briefing or whatever is something that I've said will lay a path, if you like, to the departure process. So in the event that you've got heavy crew members, and particularly if you've got two heavy crew members, chances are they're going to pay no attention whatever in the briefing process unless you draw them in. And drawing them in is can be quite difficult. But nevertheless, it's something that you should attempt. And at this stage of the flight, the last thing you want to do is to be ratty. So it's a difficult or complex state of affairs. Anyway, briefing done, the fuel figure agreed. Now we're trolling off to the bus. As I say, my target is to be on the bus before the cabin crew if I possibly can. So I'll get down there, get through the security checks, and I'll take a position on the bus where it's at the front of the bus, but where I stand up and I greet every cabin crew member who comes on the bus, shake their hand, say, "I'm Colin," and I make them look me in the eye and tell me who they are. And some of them find that quite difficult. And it's useful for me because that tells me about, at the outset, what sort of cabin crew I've got. When all of the cabin crew are on board, I then stand up and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention please? I'm sorry I didn't make your briefing," brackets, they don't know I had no intention of making their briefing, "but I just wanted to take a few moments, if I may, to introduce myself and my crew. I'm Colin, this is John, this is Peter, blah 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 blah. The flight time is going to take this, the weather is going to be that." And I used to take great pleasure in inviting passengers at any time, but I can't do that any longer. That doesn't mean to say I wouldn't like to see you at any time you have a moment and you'd like to visit us. In fact, subject to the CSD's agreement, there's one or two flight deck seats available for a takeoff and landing for anybody who would like to come up. Brackets, they rarely do, about 3 in 10, something like that, flights. But in any event, I'm going to walk around the aeroplane as and when time permits, and at the time that's convenient to you. Now, I know that you'll have been to Singapore many times, but can I remind you that we spend a long period of our flight a great distance away from the nearest airport I can put the aeroplane down if we have a problem. So I'd be very grateful if you would keep a very good fire watch for me tonight, particularly during the dark. That all said, the object is to have some fun, I'm sure we will. Or something to that effect, or something light at the end. Now, why do I do that? Well, 1. Yes, it's absolutely vital to meet the cabin crew. 2, it is only fair, I believe, that they can make an assessment of what sort of guy is in command of the aeroplane, because it's their lives as well as mine. And in this day and age, if we do have a problem before we've been able to get to know each other socially, and I need them to jump, I want them to jump because they recognise they are flying for a professional captain. And that means to say that I will be empathetic with them and with their role, and I want them to make an assessment of the sort of crew and the sort of operation that's going to be run. I've also, by saying something along the operational line, whether it was the fire watch or whatever, indicated to the heavy crew members that weren't paying any attention to the briefing just how I expect this operation to be run. In other words, it's going to be a professional operation in accordance with standard operating procedures. Now, again, you can do whatever you want. I found that works for me because at London I was very sensitive to the fact that by going into the cabin crew briefing room, I very often upset the flow of the CSD's briefing. And secondly, and much more importantly, it was using my time. And we've agreed that I'm always selfish with time and space. So I found another way to do the same thing, but at a time that is convenient to me, and a time that doesn't actually encroach on my time and space. Try it. See if it works for you. So finally we reach the aircraft, and we then have our work cut out in spades. If there's just two of us, then there's lots to do and very little time to do it. And of course, if the aeroplane has a snag on it or has something that requires your personal attention as commander, then, if you like, the organisation is stealing time from you. If you arrive at the airplane with a heavy crew member, well, heavy crew members are there to assist you, the commander. So use them in any way that you see fit, reasonable way that you see fit. Usually they expect to do the outside check. Actually, what I often do is ask them to do my scan check and I'll do the outside check. But you do whatever you want. But in using them as heavy crew members, don't forget that it is your responsibility to, for instance, check the takeoff performance and so on and so forth. And if you did have him do the scan check, don't forget you've still got the responsibility to check the route, what have you. You will have had to have seen the dispatcher. You will have had another conversation with the CSD for sure. You will be dealing with the refueler, whatever. So the thing that is fundamentally different from a departure and simulator and the departure for real is that everybody but everybody is trying to distract you from the job at hand. And sometimes you feel as commander, in many ways it underlines the loneliness of command at times. That you, the commander, are the only person in British Airways that is interested in getting this airplane away on time. And so it's going to need all of your personal qualities to bring it together, bring your part of the operation together so that you are not, the crew is not, the cause of the delay unnecessarily. And I underline that word, unnecessarily, because there are times when you will be the cause of the delay for good reason. Immediately comes to mind de-icing or adverse weather or serious technical problems that you've got to understand before you go flying, so on and so forth. But in the normal departure process, the flight crew should not normally be the cause of a delayed aircraft. Which means to say you can have to have fixed in your mind a point at which the before start checks are going to start, so that you can get your briefing done in an unhurried way. But whilst people are trying to busily interrupt you with the, will you sign the tech log, are you happy with the fuel, would you like a cup of tea, and every other bloody thing that happens just prior to departure when you are at your most busy. So given that by now I hope you're a believer that one of the things a commander needs is to be selfish with time and space, what actions can we take to, if you like, minimise the time spent in the briefing process, so that we've still got plenty of time, we've still got plenty of space to do all that we need to do, but in a sort of, could I say, a leisurely manner rather than a time-pressed manner. And there are two things that I think you can practically do that will help. Firstly, if you think about your passenger address, which has got to happen before we get going, a standard passenger address should be something that you can do so familiarly, you can think of, as a man, two things at once, which is really unusual. You should be able to plug in the tape and be able to do other things while still making your passenger address relevant and informative and personal to you. In other words, it's got to cover the requirements of the operations manual, but it's got to be your address. It's no good being my address. I've got two. So, just as an example, here's my passenger address. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you. This is the captain speaking. My name is Colin Seaman, along with my colleagues here on the flight deck, First Officer X, First Officer Y, and all of my cabin crew. It's a very great pleasure indeed to welcome you on board our British Airways Rolls-Royce powered 747 to San Francisco. Ground crews are just completing the very last loading of your bags, and when that's done we're going to ask air traffic control for permission to push back and start our engines, and then we'll taxi out for a takeoff on runway 27 left here at Heathrow. 27 left is a westerly runway on the southern side of the airport, and when we get airborne we'll follow a route that climbs out towards Manchester, and then following along the Pennines on a route that you can follow if you so wish on the in-flight entertainment screens in front of you. When we get into our cruise and we update our computers, those screens will show a very accurate time of arrival into San Francisco. Weather conditions are forecast to be quite good, but that said, I always recommend that you keep your seatbelts fastened, just as we do here on the flight deck, just in case there's any unexpected turbulence. Weather forecast for arrival in San Francisco is a very pleasant full day. Now, my cabin crew today is being led by Cabin Service Director XYZ, and I know he and all of his team will be doing everything they possibly can to make you as comfortable as possible. You'll understand that I need to return to my duties here on the flight deck, but before I do, could I remind you that, of course, my prime responsibility is for your safety, and to that end I want you to pay particular attention to the safety equipment and procedures presentation that will be made to you by my crew very shortly now. This is made for your own safety, and indeed for the safety of all those passengers seated round about you. I'll talk to you a little bit later, but in the meantime I wish you a very pleasant flight with us today, and I thank you for choosing British Airways. Now, personal to me, something I can do without thinking. I've got an alternative that says something along the lines that it's not very often these days that I have to commence my address with an apology for a late departure, but this is one of those occasions. The problem is, whatever it is. Okay, now, I'm not for a moment suggesting you should do that. What I'm suggesting is that, one, it's personal to you and it covers the operational requirements, but 2, it is so well practiced in the bath, driving to work, whatever, that it can come out succinctly and to a certain extent without thinking, because with that other part of your brain you are then able to keep an eye on what's going on at this time when you're coming up against the departure gate. You can agree or not, you can practice or not. The more you do it as a co-pilot, the easier, funnily enough, your command is, because it's one of the big obstacles would you believe on a command course. Because I know that most captains probably do not invite you to do the welcome aboard address, not least because it's his job. Something that I will delegate to co-pilots because I'm quite happy to pick up the pieces in the end. But, the important thing is that you cover the operational requirements and that you can do it succinctly. And that is also true of your pre-flight brief. Now the other part of the before start checks that is often mishandled is the departure briefing. I am not here going to talk about the importance of the interactivity, the reports of relevance, other than to say the obvious things. Look, we've just been propping up the counter in flight technical dispatch. We've looked at the AIS together. We've looked at and been discussing the state of the aeroplane and everything else that is relevant. And a good briefing, the ones that you've enjoyed being part of, not just listening to, but being part of, are the model for you. Interactivity is very important. Of course it's important. You want the involvement of the crew. You want them to feel that they can put their sixpence in if you have missed something. It needs to be relevant to today. There's absolutely no point in talking about the high ground over the Himalayas if you're in Hong Kong, which is 2.5 hours away, when you're likely to kill yourself on Lantau Island, which is sitting out of the right window there. If there isn't weather problems, or there aren't weather problems, why mention it? If there aren't AIS problems, why mention it? The target seems to me to use as few words as possible, but whilst covering the requirements. So as far as the emergency brief is concerned, that for me is up here. It's by rote, as the PA that we just talked about. And it goes something like this. Okay guys, this is going to be a standard left-hand seat, flap 20 departure, 27 left. You're going to advise me of any malfunction. Below 80 knots we're going to stop for a master caution or at any time that I think it's necessary. But in addition, up to V1, either of us will call stop for what? And he'll say, okay. If stop is called, what do you expect me to do? I expect you, meanwhile, to bring the reverse up to the interlock, check speed brake deploys if it doesn't deploy it, and if we're above 100 knots, pull full reverse into all engines that are working. Below 100 knots you're going to maintain reverse idle unless I say otherwise. You're going to call me speeds as we accelerate. I am going to bring the aircraft to a stop on the runway. I'll take account of the wind if we're on fire, and then we will deal with the emergency on my command. Stop. Now, the reason I stop there is because that covers the requirement of the operations manual, and I'm being selfish with time and space, aren't I? It goes on. If we have an emergency or failure, and I continue, I'll say continue, but we'll do nothing until we're safely established in the climb with gear selected up, and after you've restated the emergency, I will call for the appropriate action. I will fly the aeroplane, take the RT, stick an autopilot in whilst you're doing any memory items of an emergency checklist. If we've lost an engine, we'll start the clean-up at 1,090 feet. We'll retract flaps on schedule. We'll do the balance of the emergency from the QRH, clear the ICAS, do the after takeoff checklist. And unless we're faced with a greater emergency, we will continue on up at V2 plus 100 to a sensible altitude of, let's say, 6,000 feet, where we'll decide what we're going to do next. Now, again, there are any ways of skinning the cat here, but notice I haven't asked him what the memory items of the fire engine checklist are, because the ops manual doesn't require me to. The ops manual actually says when time permits, we should review other emergency checklists, particularly those with memory items in them. In other words, if time is pressed, then that's all that's going to happen. We're going to cover the ops manual requirements, but nothing else. Time does permit, let's review what we're going to do if we get a hard GPWS. It's the most likely reason I'm going to lose my life on a 4-engine aeroplane. Or if it's blowing a gale, let's review a windshield go around, or whatever. Okay? But that's been practiced so often that it comes out succinctly and therefore uses the least amount of time. And happily, if we've done everything, then we're sitting around waiting for things to happen so we can go flying rather than the other way about. And by creating that time and space, when things get thrown at us, the likelihood is that we'll catch the problem, we'll catch the ball whilst it's in the air. It gives the opportunity for our other crew members to support us. Colin, you forgot to mention the fact that we've got this engine problem for starting. Thanks very much. Yeah. It provides the opportunity for maximising the effective teamwork of the crew that we have available to us. You do anything you like within the operations manual, but recognise that these two areas often provide problems to crews, and they are fixable, and they are readily fixable and best fixed prior to doing your command calls. When you practice, when it's your sector and you give a briefing, get the old man to give you some feedback. And listen to the different feedbacks, and then find the nice compromise between what you're comfortable with and what you're told works. Okay. Going to try to get the thing away on schedule. Most importantly, we're going to try and arrive on schedule. In between time, the way in which you run your flight deck, again, will be down to you and your command within the operations manual. I always end my briefing with the statement that, listen guys, I do my utmost to operate in accordance with the operations manual. If I'm failing to do so, I'm being thick, and I smile at them and saying, you have my permission to beat me around the head. In other words, I make a statement of intent. And it's a genuine statement of intent. And what I'm trying to do is to create a relaxed and professional atmosphere on this flight deck. Everyone knows where they are. And to do it in a way where, again, nothing is confrontational. It's supportive. It's supportive to me as a commander. Now, that means to say that I've got to consider, if I've got a heavy crew, the handover to the heavy crew member. And apart from the discussion that's laid down in flight crew orders, or in the operations manual, I will include something along the lines, listen guys, particularly if it's two co-pilots, listen guys, I'm off watch, but I'm not off duty. Therefore, anything untoward happens, don't hesitate to call me. And of course I will have told them where I am. I'm going to walk about, and then I'm going to the bunk, or I'm going to the bunk and then I'm going to walk about, whatever. The establishing, if you like, if you've got two junior co-pilots, who's going to be in command in your absence, is something that perhaps needs to be explored, but rarely, I would say, because generally they'll sort it out for themselves. And anyway, they've got instructions to call Dad if something goes wrong in any case. The other things that are need to be thought about and generally handled, badly, are one, the handover to CSD. If you're getting off on an extended transit, then not forgetting to advise him about whether the aircraft is going to be fueled or not, and who is responsible for keeping the doors clear and so on and so forth. And of course, if you're all getting off, handing the aeroplane over properly to the ground staff and to engineering if you're going to leave the APU running. All of those sorts of things come in the package of running a professional operation day to day along the route. Now, again, you can go on forever in this area, but I've given you one or two highlights about what you can do to help yourself. Whether you choose to or not, of course, it's up to you. So just before I draw this to a close, a quick word about PAs. We used to give very good PA training in British Airways, and that's been lost to some extent. One of the ways I think that you can think about your passenger address and the effect, if you like, that you can make on a scheduled operation that gets to A to B on time and with no operational or weather incidents, is thinking about the impact that you have on the PA. Yes, you're going to introduce the operation yourself, and at some point or other you're going to make a PA perhaps along the route. And very often you hear crews addressing themselves to the frequent traveller. Well, that's always seems to be nuts, because the frequent traveller probably doesn't listen, and secondly, he's heard it all before. Whereas if you address, or if you spend time listening to when you're travelling passenger, to the good passenger address, they're generally addressed to the people who aren't frequent flyers, who are excited about going between A and B. And if you address your PA to them, then funnily enough, it's more interesting to everyone else. Don't forget to smile when you speak. That comes through on the PA. And always tell the truth. You might have to shorten the truth a bit, but tell the truth. Tell it like it is, without being scaremongering. The goodbye address is also very important. I don't do it whilst we're taxiing, because I believe that my attention should be on taxiing the aircraft. I always do it just after the aircraft engines have been shut down, the airplane's being settled. I go on the PA and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain, this is Colin Seaman. Welcome to this glorious day here at London. You know, it gives me immense pleasure to have brought you 5,432 nautical miles from Singapore and put you on the gate here right on schedule. So I do hope you enjoyed your flight with us today, because all of us at British Airways never forget that you have a wide choice of airlines, and I'm delighted you decided to exercise that choice and fly with us. Just hope it's not too long before we see you again. Bye-bye now. Or something like that. Again, personal to you, but a farewell, something that makes a point of what it is that we have achieved together. When you make PAs as a commander, and you are flying with a CSD, that you can trust. Ask them for feedback and then act on it. Because in time, you can get to a position where you wander down the stairs and one of the cabin crew will say to you, that was a very impressive PA, Captain, or I do like your PA's, Captain, or passengers did comment favourably on your PA's, Captain, or whatever. And you think, did something like that today. It's up to you.